Hey everybody, so I'm having problems with my camera thing freezing now. I don't know what's going on. So I'm recording from my phone again because I do want to get these videos up, but that's why it's a different angle and looks a little different because I'm back on the phone. But I want to talk about the Eastern and Western Conference playoff races and specifically the road ahead for the bubble teams. There's not much time left in the NHL season. We're really coming down here to the final few games, but the playoff races are very, very tight. So I want to start with the Eastern Conference because the Eastern Conference here, I just want to start with the East. So there are three teams I think still in it as far as the Eastern Conference goes. We have Carolina in the first wild card spot, Montreal. Here we go. Montreal in the second wild card spot right now, and Columbus in the third, or first team out, Columbus. So Carolina is sitting at 91 points through 76 games, and they're in that first spot. Montreal has 90 points through 77 games, and Columbus has 88 points through 76 games. So the games remaining are starting to really dwindle here, and the points are very, very close. Overall, I think Carolina is pretty much safe. I think they're in good shape to make it, but however, the point is they're only ahead of Montreal by 1 point right now. So I did want to include them because it's certainly no guarantee. If Carolina has a really bad stretch the rest of the way here, they definitely could be the team that drops out, although I don't think that's happening. Carolina is going to make the playoffs. But basically what I want to do here is look at the remaining schedules for these three teams, and then I'm going to call games that they'll probably lose an L, games that they'll probably win a W, and any toss-up game a T. And we'll see, what the road ahead looks like for these teams. So starting with Carolina, they play Washington tonight, and they just played Washington on Tuesday and lost 4-1. Washington is the better team, so I'm calling that one an L. Then they play Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is technically still alive for a playoff spot at 82 points, although they're not getting in. They would basically have to win out to get in. That is not going to happen. So Philadelphia is going to be a desperate team because they're still technically in it, but they're really not, and Carolina is the better team, so that's a W. If Carolina wants to be taken seriously as a good team and as a playoff team, they have to win games like that against Philadelphia and teams like Philadelphia, so I'm calling that one a W. They should win that game. Then they play Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh and Carolina are very close in the standings, but I think Pittsburgh is the better team. They have the better roster, and they've been playing better lately. So that absolutely is, I'm putting down as an L. It could be a T, but I'm calling it an L because Pittsburgh, I think, is better. Then they play Toronto. That's another team that's better than Carolina, so I'm calling that one an L. Then they go to play New Jersey. I shouldn't say go to New Jersey. I have no idea if that's home or away. But they should absolutely beat the Devils. The Devils are a last place team, so that's a W. And then they finish up with Philly, which should be a W, especially since Philly won't be playing it for anything important at that time. So that's a 3. That's 3 and 3 the rest of the way. I know that there could be overtime points involved, but for the sake of simplicity, we'll just call that 3 and 3. That's 6 more points and 3 more wins, which gets Carolina to 97 points. That should absolutely get them into the playoffs. Moving on to Montreal now. They play Columbus tonight in what is an absolutely huge, huge game. And that's a toss-up if I've ever seen one. Both of these teams right next to each other fighting for their playoff lives. That is a toss-up, and that is a huge, huge game. If Columbus wins that game, then all of a sudden the points are tied and they have a game in hand. That puts them in the driver's seat. If Montreal wins that game, that opens up a 4-point spread between them and Columbus, and that puts them in the driver's seat in a really, really good shape for them. So huge, huge game tonight between Columbus and Montreal. Then they play Winnipeg, and that sucks because Winnipeg's a really good team, so we'll call that an L. because Winnipeg's just a much better team than Montreal. And then what sucks even more is after Winnipeg, they have to play Tampa Bay, so that's an L because Tampa's the best team in the league. And then they finish up the year with Washington and Toronto, both L's, both better teams than the Canadiens. So Montreal has an extremely difficult schedule to end the year. You know, they have to win this game tonight against Columbus because the rest of the way is incredibly difficult for them. And now, just because these are L's, I'm not saying that they can't win those games. They absolutely could win those games, or so, at least one or two of them. But they're the underdog in those games, so it's going to be really difficult. So, I mean, tonight is basically a must-win against Columbus, given how difficult the rest of the schedule is for them. So that I have no wins, 4 losses. That was dumb. No wins, 4 losses, and 1 toss-up. Let's assume that they win, assume they win one of these really difficult games. Maybe they beat Toronto on the last day of the season. Maybe they beat Washington. And then assume they beat Columbus. That's 4 more points. That gets them to 94 points. Is 94 going to be enough to get in? Well, that's dependent on what Columbus does. So Columbus plays Montreal in that huge game tonight. That's a toss-up. We all know that. Then they play Nashville. That's going to be an L because Nashville is definitely a better team than the Columbus Blue Jackets. Then they play Buffalo. That should absolutely be a win. Buffalo's really tailed off the second half of the season. Then they play Boston. That's an L because Boston is definitely a better team than Columbus. Then they play the Rangers. That's a game that they should win. In Ottawa, that's a game that they should win. So that's a 3-2-1 rest of the season for Columbus. 3 wins, 2 losses, and then 1 game's a toss-up. We'll see. So assume that they do get 3 wins out of the rest of the way, which seems very possible given the schedule. That's 6 points. That gets them to 94 points. Ooh. That's Montreal and Columbus tied with 94 points. Then it goes to the tiebreaker, which I don't know who has what it's looking like as to who would get the tiebreaker. It's going to come down to the last day. That is Carolina being the first wildcard team with 97 points, and I have Montreal and Columbus ending tied with 94 points. It's going to come down to the end of the season. This is going to be one heck of a playoff race for sure. It may come down to one team getting an extra point in an OT loss and getting maybe Montreal gets the game against Washington and Toronto to overtime and steals a couple extra points and that does it. Maybe Columbus loses to Nashville but in overtime and that extra point gets them to 95. I mean, this is going to come down to the absolute last day. I can't make a call. What I do know is that Carolina seems relatively safe given what they're ahead now and their remaining schedule. They seem relatively safe and should make the playoffs. Montreal and Columbus, it is a complete toss-up. Either of these teams who get in, and one very disappointed team is going to be missing the playoffs. But, it's going to be a wild end of the season in the Eastern Conference race. Next up, I'm going to do a video right after this about the Western Conference, and we'll do the same thing looking at the Western Conference race. But thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you want to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon and merchandise store are in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.